Beowulf. Did you hear that? They say that if there is too much talking and laughter, Grendel will come and drag you away. You don't know about Grendel. Then I don't suppose you know about Beowulf either. Listen closely and I will tell you the story of the greatest Geat warrior and how he fought the vile monster. More than 1,000 years ago, the Danish king Hrothgar decided to build a great hall to celebrate the victories of his loyal warriors. When the hall was finished, he named it Heorot, and proclaimed that it should be a place for feasting and for the bestowing of gifts. Heorot towered over the desolate marshy landscape. Its white gables could be seen for miles. On a dark and moonless night, Hrothgar held his first great banquet in the main hall. There was the finest food and ale for all the warriors and their wives. There were minstrels and musicians too. Their joyous sounds could be heard all across the marshes to the dark blue waters where an evil being lived. Grendel, once a human but now a cruel and bloodthirsty creature. Grendel, no longer a man but still with some human features. Grendel was much angered by the sounds of merriment that came from the hall. Late that night, when the king and queen had retired to their rooms and all the warriors were asleep, Grendel crept across the squelching marshes. When he reached the door, he found it barred. With one mighty blow, he pushed the door open. Then Grendel was inside. That night, in that hall, Grendel slaughtered 30 of Hrothgar's bravest warriors. He snapped their necks with his claw-like hands and drank their blood before sinking his teeth into their flesh. When none were left alive, Grendel returned to his dark, dank home beneath the watery waves. In the morning, the hall was filled with weeping and grieving. The sight of the carnage of the strongest and bravest Danes filled the land with a deep despairing sadness. For 12 long winters, Grendel continued to ravage and kill any who came near Heorot. Many a brave clansman tried to do battle with Grendel, but their armour was useless against the evil one. The story of the terrible deeds of Grendel were carried far and wide. Eventually, they reached Beowulf, the mightiest and noblest warrior of his people. He vowed that he would slay the evil monster. Beowulf sailed with 14 of his loyal thanes to the Danish shore. As they landed, the coast guard challenged them. "Halt, he who dares to land! What is thy calling upon these shores?" "I am Beowulf. I have ventured to your lands to fight Grendel for your king, Hrothgar, so make haste and take me to him," he commanded. Beowulf arrived at Heorot and surveyed the desolate landscape. Grendel was somewhere out there. With resolve in his heart, he turned and entered the hall. Beowulf presented himself to the king. "Hrothgar, true and noble king of the Danes, this is my pledge. I will rid thee of the evil Grendel." "Beowulf, I have heard of your brave deeds and great strength, but Grendel is stronger than any living being that you would ever have encountered," replied the king. "Hrothgar, I will not only fight and defeat Grendel, but I will do it with my bare hands," Beowulf assured the king. Many thought that this was an idle boast, for they had not heard of his great strength and brave deeds. That very night, Beowulf and his most trusted warriors laid down to sleep in the great hall. As the light dimmed, Grendel made his way across the marshy ground to the hall, not realizing that tonight his bloodthirsty cravings would not be satisfied. Grendel burst into the hall. He wrenched a warrior from his bench, snapped his neck and drank his blood, and then tossed him aside. He moved on to the next bench and grabbed that man. When he felt Beowulf's grip, he knew he had met a power as great as his own. "No more, you evil being," commanded Beowulf. "I shall fight you to the death. Good shall prevail." Grendel lunged forward to grab the warrior's throat, but Beowulf grabbed his arm. Thus they were locked in mortal combat. Each was seething with the desire to kill the other. Finally, with a mighty jerk and using all the power within him, Beowulf ripped Grendel's arm off. A terrible scream pierced the night air as Grendel staggered away, leaving a trail of blood. He crossed the misty marshes for the last time and died in a cave beneath the dark blue murky waters. Beowulf lifted the arm above his head for all to see and proclaimed, "I, Beowulf, have defeated Grendel. Good has triumphed over evil." When Beowulf presented Hrothgar with Grendel's arm, the king rejoiced and gave his thanks. Beowulf, greatest of men, from this day forth I will love thee like a son and bestow wealth upon you. A great feast was commanded for that night to celebrate Beowulf's defeat of Hrothgar's enemy, but the rejoicing came too soon. Under the deep blue chilling waters a mother mourned her son and vowed to avenge his death. In the middle of the night she swam to the surface and made the journey to the hall of Heorot. Here she terrorized those within. She grabbed one of Hrothgar's warriors, wrung his neck, and ran off to devour him in peace. All had forgotten that Grendel had a mother. Once more Heorot was filled with the sound of mourning, but also of anger. Hrothgar summoned Beowulf to his chamber, and once more Beowulf pledged to do battle. "I will go and defeat Grendel's mother. The killing has to stop." With these words he gathered his 14 noble warriors and rode out towards Grendel's watery home. They tracked the monster across the marshes until they reached the cliffs. There a terrible sight met their eyes, the head of the slain warrior hanging from a tree by the side of the blood-stained waters. Beowulf dismounted from his horse and put on his armour. With sword in hand he plunged into the gloomy water. Down and down he swam, until after many an hour he reached the bottom. There he came face to face with Grendel's mother. She lunged at him, and clutching him with her claws she dragged him into a cave. If it had not been for his armour, he would surely have perished. Within the cavern Beowulf drew his sword, and with a mighty blow struck her on the head. But the sword skimmed off and left no mark. Beowulf slung his sword away. He seized the monster by the shoulders and threw her to the ground. Oh, but at that moment Beowulf tripped, and the evil monster drew her dagger and stabbed him. Beowulf felt the point against his armour, but the blade did not penetrate. Immediately Beowulf rolled over. As he staggered to his feet he saw the most magnificent sword, crafted by giants. He pulled it from its scabbard and brought the blade down upon Grendel's mother. Such a piercing blow she could not survive, and she fell dead upon the floor. The sword dissolved in her hot, evil blood. Beowulf looked around and saw the treasures that Grendel had hoarded. Lying in a corner was Grendel's corpse. Beowulf went over to the body of the evil being and hacked off Grendel's head. Holding the head and the hilt of the sword, he swam to the surface of the waters, where his loyal companions were anxiously waiting. They rejoiced at the sight of their great hero and helped him out of his armour. Together they rode back to Heorot, carrying Grendel's head upon a pole. Beowulf and his 14 noble warriors presented King Hrothgar and his queen with Grendel's head and the hilt of a sword. There were many speeches that night. First Beowulf told of his fight and near death beneath the icy waters. Then Hrothgar renewed his gratitude for all that had been done. "Beowulf, loyal friend, these rings I bestow upon you and your warriors. Great shall be your fame for freeing us Danes from these evil ones. Now let the celebrations begin." And celebrate they did. Those gathered in Heorot had the biggest feast there had ever been. They ate and drank, danced and listened to tales of old. From that night forth they all slept soundly in their beds. No longer was there danger lurking across the marshes. After a few days Beowulf and his men prepared to set sail for their homeland. Laden with gifts and a friendship between the Geats and Danes, they sailed away for their homes. And what became of Beowulf, the greatest and noblest of Geats? He had many more adventures and fought many a monster. But that is another story, to be told at another time.